Hey, what is up, guys? It's Naveed. Welcome to my channel. Before we jump straight into the topic of learning chess, President Trump is here. It looks like he's going to be watching the New York Yankees or something like that. I see all these helicopters flying over me. I am in New York, but yeah, I picked up chess when I was about 7 years old. My family and I we lived in Russia, Moscow, Russia. So my dad and uncle they would occasionally play in the park or at home, things like that. So yeah, that's how I got into the game. I think it's a very fascinating game. There is a lot to it. At first, it seems overwhelming, but if you take the mini steps day by day, chunk it up into parts, learn by bits, I think I would say you can learn all of it all at once. So you kind of have to dedicate some time to practice, time to play, and maybe some time to study actual openings, theories. Yeah, once you guys get more and more advanced. I'm currently sitting at 1900 USCF. I'm nationally known as an expert, so I hope you guys can learn a lot from me. So let's jump straight into the game. And don't mind the helicopter noise. I don't know when it's gonna stop. But yeah, um, you have 64 squares. That's the chessboard. Both sides, white and black, they have 16 pieces. You have 8 pawns. Your opponent also has 8 pawns. Both sides have 2 rooks. Both sides have 2 knights, 2 bishops, a king, and a queen. That's a queen. So a chessboard consists of files and rows. So this is your A file, B file, C file, D file, and so on. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. And also rows. So this is your first row or first rank. Second rank, third rank, fourth rank, and so on. It goes up to eight ranks or 8 rows. Doesn't matter. It's whatever that makes it easy for you to remember. How do the pawns move? Well, you have a couple of options. For example, the move that I usually play, pawn d2 to d4. You notice how I could have moved this pawn from its initial starting square. It can move 2 squares if you wanted to. It can also move 1 square. So pawn d2 to d3. Okay? So all the pawns can do this. I mean, let's make a pawn move for black. How many ways can this pawn move? Well, 2 ways. Pawn to f6 or f5. So they can move, black can move a pawn to f5. Fine. How do pawns capture? Let's say white played pawn to e4. Can this pawn grab that pawn? Yes. So pawns can only capture 1 square diagonally, like so. So this pawn was able to take that pawn because it was 1 square diagonally away from it. Just like so. If I were to move a piece 1 square diagonally next to that pawn, it's actually able to just take it, like that. So one pawn can pretty much take all your pieces if you allow it. For example, pawn takes pawn, and if we're super not careful and we pretty much make a silly move like king up, can this pawn take our rook? Yes. And it turns out pawns have an option of promoting to any piece that they want when they reach the end of the row. I mean the 8th rank. In this case, black's 8th rank is right here from black's perspective. So black took our rook and it promoted itself to anything it wanted. A queen, a knight, a bishop, or a rook. How does the knight move? Well, the knight always makes an L shape. Like so. Knight G to F3. The knight makes this 1-2-1 over move, or like this L shape. So from this square, where can this knight move to? It can move to G5, E5, D4, D2, E1, G1, H4. The only thing is you can't stump over your pieces, so you can't really move the knight on top of your king or your pawn. So these 3 squares are currently occupied. So you can move this knight to any of these other squares. Another easy way to remember how does the knight move, it always moves from a light square to a dark square. So you notice how these squares are dark squares, and that square is a light square. So it always interchanges between white and black. So that's another way to remember. But yeah, it always makes this L shape. Same with black. So black can move forward. White can. How can we move out the knight on b1? Well, knight c3. How can this knight move? Knight c6. It can also move to a6 if it wanted to. Now, how does the bishop move? Currently, can the bishops get out? No, we have to push a pawn. We have to create an escape for the bishops. So pawn to e4. Let's say black played e5. Now this bishop can move, but this bishop still cannot move. So let's take out this bishop first, and then let's say black made a knight move. Now, to take this bishop out, we want to push this pawn. You can also push this pawn if you wanted to. Let's just push this pawn so the bishop can go here. We call this fianchettoing, when you put the bishop around these pawns. Fianchetto, whatever. Bishop e7, let's say, well, that bishop could have moved. So bishop b2. So now the bishops are out. The bishops always move as far as they can see diagonally. So can this bishop take this pawn if it wanted to? Yes, it can. Let's say black played a pawn move. Can this bishop go ahead and grab that pawn? Well, you can, but is it a good move? Probably not, because you only want a pawn. You are checking the king, because the bishop is attacking the king. That's called a check. Well, the king can pretty much simply take the bishop. So was that a good trade? No, that was a bad trade. But right now we're just talking how the pieces move. So let's rewind. How does the queen move? Well, let's create an escape route for the queen, just for demonstration. So the queen can move. Let's make another move too. So the queen can move diagonally as far as it can see, also vertically and horizontally. So the queen can actually move to all these dots for the moment. But after my next move, pawn to c3, let's make a simple move for black. You notice how these dots opened up too. So the queen can move forward, left, right, diagonally as far as it can see, but it cannot jump over pieces, much like the knights can do. So the knights are able to jump over pieces. They're the only pieces that can do that. So the queen, for example, it can move to a4 if it wanted to, from d1 to a4. And by the way, all squares have names. So for those of you who are confused about what I mean by d3, f4, and why am I saying these letters and numbers, well, let's start off naming squares. Let's go back. So that square is called A1. So you're on the first column or the first file and the first row. So going left and right. So it's A1 because we're on the first column and the first row. What about this square? Well, we're on the D column or D file. And what row are we on? Well, count them. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that square is called D4. Or if you want to cheat, you can look at the letter up here and the number like on the right. Just pretty much crisscross, and that's your square name. So let's practice one more. What's the name of this square? That's F. And how many rows are we going up? 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this square is called F6. If the knight moves to that square, we simply say knight F6. So does that make sense? Cool. Now, what about the rooks? Let's make a move or an escape route for the rook. Right now, this rook is free to move, so it can actually move up. Is this a good move? Well, in this case, no, because the bishop is eyeing the rook right away, and the rook is more it's stronger than the bishop. The rook is 5 points, the bishop is 3 points. So you don't want to lose your rook like this. But this is for demonstration. Let's say a knight moves to f6. Where else can this rook besides going up and down? Well, now it can see to the left. So if I click on it, all these dots are where that rook can move to. So it can move to the left and down. Let's move it to the middle. Let's say the knight went back for some reason. So now let me click on the rook. Now it can move forward, it can move left or right. So the rook can move up and down, left and right, for as long as it can see. For now, this rook cannot move backwards because there are pieces behind it. But if these squares were empty, it can also move backwards if it wanted to. What about the king? The king can only move one square at a time, as long as that square is open. In this case, the king cannot move from its starting position. So let me show you what... Well, before we get into that, let's go over how to checkmate, because that's the whole point of chess, is to get your opponent into checkmate. So, looking at this position, how can white win the game? Well, some of you may say queen here, and then you want to bring the king closer, things like that. So from this square, the queen went to f7 because we just talked about it. That's how the queen moves. In this case, can black move his king? Well, no. The black king cannot move at all, because each square that the black king wants to move to is being controlled by either the king or the queen. In this case, this is called stalemate. So what is this? A stalemate is pretty much a draw. It's sad for white to have a queen and it still fall for the stalemate. I mean, it's possible, especially if you're down on time. In this case, black wants a stalemate because he's losing the position. If we go back, so let's... How can white win this game? And one move. And besides going here. What if we go straight up? Queen c8. Is this checkmate? Yes. Checkmate is only when your piece is directly attacking the king. Is the queen seeing the king? Yes, she is. Whereas before, in this position, was the queen seeing the king? No. Therefore, it's not checkmate. Queen c8, the queen sees the king and the king has no escape route, because this king is one square away from this king. Therefore, the kings can never be one square apart from each other. Therefore, it's stalemate. Okay. So now, looking at this position, it's white to move. You have the kings, but white has a rook. How can white finish this game? If you said rook all the way up, excellent. Because the rook sees the king, doesn't he? Yeah, so it's... In this case, it's checkmate. Because the king cannot move to a safe square. Anywhere the king moves, it's either it can legally not move there, or it can't capture the rook. The king is too far from capturing the rook. And we talked about how the king can only move one square. So in this case, this is checkmate. And to win a rook versus king, you want to wall the king in this fashion. So this is the only way to win. I mean, the king can be anywhere along this wall. Just bring your king close to this king and bring your rook next to the king. And that's how you win this. So now, before we get into that, let's go over how beginners, a lot of times, they get frustrated because they fall for this a lot of times. So, pawn to e4. Let's say black plays copycats e5. This isn't really copycatting, it's an actual king's pawn opening, but let's just say both sides are beginners. White plays bishop c4. Well, before that, white brings out his queen. The reason why you don't want to bring out the queen too early, because there are a lot of pieces on the board, and bringing out the queen too early, she will just get attacked and attacked, and you keep on have to move the queen over and over, and you don't want to do that. You'll be wasting too much time, and all your other pieces, meanwhile you're moving your queen, they're not going to be developed. But in this case, white has a plan. A lot of times in this position, well, the queen is eyeing f7. Let's just move the knight. If the queen can the queen see f7? She can, but is this a good move? And you're telling your opponent checkmate, checkmate, checkmate. But is it checkmate? No, the king can actually take the queen because your queen was not defended. But sometimes some players play g6. What's wrong with this move? Well, you just blundered something major. The queen could have seen this pawn. That's a check, and now that's a fork. The king is attacked and the rook. Doesn't matter how you block. With the bishop, with the queen, white's gonna win your rook. So that's one of a typical way, a lot of times, what black falls for. But let's say black didn't play g6, and let's say black protected this pawn. Knight c6, excellent move. Oops. So e4, e5, queen h5, knight c6. So the knight protects the e5 pawn. So now, is this a good move? Queen takes pawn? No, it's terrible, because the knight will take our queen. And the queen is like 3 knights combined. So the queen is 9 points, the knight is only 3 points. So the queen, we have one attacker on f7. Can we put another attacker? Yes, we can put another attacker. And a lot of times black makes a big mistake here. They move the knight thinking, oh, I'm attacking the queen, I'm attacking the pawn. But this is a terrible move. Why? Because now it's different. We have 2 attackers on f7. So are we ready to take on f7? And the king is the only piece that's holding f7? Yes. In this case, this would be what? Checkmate. Is the queen seeing the king? Yes. It sees the king very up close. Can the king take the queen? Nope, not in this case, because the bishop sees our queen and helps our queen. So the king cannot take our queen. So is this checkmate? Yes. This is known as the 4-move checkmate or the scholar's mate. A lot of beginners fall for this, but there is a very easy way to defend this. Instead of bringing out the knight, what's another way to defend f7? Well, there are a couple of ways. You can push the pawn, you can move the queen to f6, e7. There are many ways. g6, and if the queen moved to f3 thinking, okay, now from f3 I'm eyeing f7 again, so the queen is trying to go to f7 again. Well, now you can simply bring out the knight. And now the queen no longer sees f7. So this is one way to get out of this trouble. I mean, now this queen looks silly. A lot of strong players don't bring out the queen too early. In this case, I mean, if you move the knight to h3, this knight will move forward. It attacks your queen, it attacks c2. So now the queen has to drop back to protect c2. I mean, you will just lose more and more time. So as soon as you know how to defend this position with black, let's say you were playing black, then you'll have a very nice position. So in this position, black's last move was he moved the knight, which was on f6, to g4, and now what is this knight doing? It's attacking the queen, but it's white to move. What should white do? So look at the king side. The whole point of the game is to deliver what? checkmate. So look at what the queen is eyeing. The queen is eyeing the rook, this pawn, and that pawn. Which one of those pawns can we take with the help of one of our other pieces? So what piece is really close to the queen? The knight. What is the knight doing? It's also eyeing h7. So the queen and the knight are pretty much teaming up, and they're trying to take something. So in this position, can you take on h7? Yes, you can. Can the king take the queen? No, because the knight is protecting the queen. So in this case, is the queen eyeing the king? Yes, she is. Is it checkmate? Yes, because the king cannot run away. I mean, the king doesn't have a square to run away. If this rook was on that square, then yeah, the king has a square to run away. But in this case, just to not make things more complicated, the game is over. So, a little bit more advanced stuff. When you're playing chess, white or black doesn't matter. There are some key principles to keep in mind. Number one, and a lot of chess players, anyone who knows even a slight bit of knowledge about chess, they will tell you, control the center. If you can manage to do so, you want to occupy the center with pawns. The central squares are these squares. You want to put pawns there if you can. I mean, you don't want to put pawns there and let your opponent take them for free. No, I'm not saying that. For example, pawn to e4. You're controlling the center. You're ready to take the bishop out, so you're occupying the center. If black plays a move like e6, so he's not occupying one of the central squares, what should white do? White should put another pawn in the middle of the board, because black allowed it. And black is not. Is black attacking any of these pawns? No. So you should do this. This is the first key principle. But after e4, if black played knight f6, is it good to play d4? Yes or no? In this case, occupying the center was bad, because what was black's last move? Black moved, or in this case, black's first move, black moved the knight to f6 to take your pawn on e4. And you ignored that. You played d4 and you ignored this. So what can black do? Well, black can get rid of one of your central pawns. Losing a pawn in this fashion, it's bad. I mean, that was your key central pawn. So you don't want to lose your pawns. You want to make sure they're defended. If black plays knight f6, well, you have a few options. You can push the pawn. You can defend the pawn with knight c3, and then it's going to defend e4. But usually players like to push and get more space. That's another principle. I mean, another topic, but it's a little bit more advanced. For now, just focus on controlling the center. In this case, either push the pawn forward or bring out another piece. Principle number 2. You want to develop toward the center. So in this case, is the knight going toward the center? Yes, it is. Sometimes, well, not sometimes, a lot of times, players like to put the knight on a3. Well, putting the knight on a3, you're not controlling a lot of squares from the edge of the board. The knights actually don't like the edge of the board. You're just controlling less squares. In this case, you can only move forward two squares. Whereas, if you put the knight on c3, you can go here, 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 here. So do you see how you control and defend and move forward easily? So yeah, that's why you want to move the knights toward the center. And also, another principle, it's for beginners, it applies. I mean, you want to move the knights before the bishops. So let's say this knight moved. In this position, yes, you may argue, why can I not move my bishop first before the knight? Well, the reason why this is being taught is because the knight's mobility is limited. So the knight either, in this case, we pretty much outruled h3. We said the knight on the edge is bad. So the knight pretty much has 2 squares that it can go to. Whereas the bishop has an option, has a lot of option. And you want to keep those options for as long as possible during the opening. And the opening is anywhere between 5 to 10 moves. So the bishop has more scope. You want to keep those options open. So that's my simple explanation of why it's recommended to move the knight before the bishops. So in this case, let's say black occupies the center. So what should we do? You should bring out your bishop. Attack the knight or go to c4. Let's go to c4. And the bishop gets out. So black does the same, but they only move 1 square. So they don't move all the way out. You can also castle the king. This is one move in chess. So pay attention. You want to move the king 2 squares to the right, and the rook comes over. On the computer, the rook comes over automatically. But if you were playing over the board and the position was like this, you're going to move the king 2 squares always when you're ready to castle. Move the king 2 squares, and you're going to physically move the rook over next to the king, just like that, if you were over the board. Why do we castle the king? Well, these pawns are actually helping the king. So castling the king makes the king more safe. You're taking the king away from the center. The center of the board may open. There might be some exchanges. Some pawns may get traded. And you don't really want to leave your king in the middle of the board. Okay? How to lose a game in 2 moves. And this ties up with the castling. So pawn to f3. Pawn e6, pawn g4. How can black win the game in 1 move? Can the queen see h4? Yes, she can. So can it move there? Yes. Is the queen attacking the king? Yes. Does the king have an escape square? In this case, we can't really move in the same direction as the queen. So no. The king cannot run away. Can we somehow block, like put a piece in these 2 squares? In this case, no. So also, can we take the queen? Well, none of our pieces can take the queen. In this case, it's checkmate. So why did this happen? Well, these pawns were your kingside pawns. And usually, you don't want to touch these pawns unless if you really, really have to. So in this case, let's play it out. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5. This is actually known as the Roy Lopez opening. Knight f6. Before we castle, let me just make a point, like e6, d3, d6. Yeah, let's just castle. So we're getting castle, put our king safe, and the bishop moved to g4. So this bishop from c8 went all the way to g4. Why did black do this? Well, black wanted to pin your knight against your queen. In this case, it's okay to push one of your kingside pawns. Pawn to h3, you're attacking. You're doing something with these pawns, which is okay. You just don't want to like not be careful and play like a move like h4. You know, push these pawns for no reason. Pawn to h3 does something. It attacks the bishop. Now the bishop has to either take the knight, move back, either to h5 or somewhere here, you know? So it's okay to push these pawns whenever you're attacking your opponent's pieces. Or something else that could happen is... so in this case, it's black to move, but just to make a point, let's say white's last move was queen back 1 square, just for the sake of this example. And then throughout the whole game, all the pieces got traded, and white never moved these pawns up. And it's black to move in this position. So what can black do? Black can actually checkmate white, believe it or not. Even though white has a queen and stuff, well, what is this? It's checkmate. Is the rook seeing the king? Yes. It turns out these pawns are blocking your king's way of escape. So Sometimes it's recommended early in the game to create some escape room for the king, so this back row issue doesn't occur. In this case, it turns out white was not careful and he fell for this back row checkmate. So yeah, I hope you guys learned something from this video. I covered all the basics. We went over some traps, checkmating patterns. I think chess overall is pattern recognition. The more you play the game, the more you will become aware of how the pieces interact. And yeah, we went over control the center. Another thing which will be covered more and more in my future videos is how to develop your pieces, how to attack the king, when to attack, when to move forward. For now, let's just take it one step at a time. Let's just learn how the pieces are moving forward and what are some ways you can checkmate the king. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video and learned something from it. Take care.